Hello students, coming to Java programming course, academic year 2021, second visit, semester 2, R19 JNTK regulations. And in unit 3, there are 3 chapters, and the last video 9, and up to 9 videos, we completed the 2 chapters, and this third chapter of this unit 3, interfaces. This chapter is composed in 3 videos, video 10, video 11, and video 12. Currently, we are in video 10. And these are the topics to be covered in unit 3 of interfaces chapter. And these are the topics we are going to discuss in this video. The first one, introduction to interfaces. Here, we can declare an interface with the keyword called interface. We can define any interface using the keyword interface. And interface is a concept and get motivated by the concept called abstract classes that was covered in the previous video. And in the inheritance, the abstract class having its own importance in the defining parent class method into the subclass method. Subclass method can implement the defined method inside of the parent class. So the same way here also, it is a motivation to create one interface to one method, and then that method can be implemented by any other classes or classes that it implements this interface. So here we can fully abstract a class interface from its implementation. And here interfaces are declaration and implementation of these interfaces are similar to the classes declaration. But here the difference between these classes and interfaces are lack of these instance variables. Whereas the class composed of members like instance variables and methods, but whereas here this interface is the difference, the lack of instance variable. That it means interface doesn't have any instance variables like class. And methods, and another difference to this class and interface, that methods are declared without any body in the interface. But generally in the classes, we can declare or define methods with some implementation, nothing but a body specifying the set of instruction to perform the method operation. But whereas in interface, the methods defined without body, as we did the same in the abstract classes. And once it is defined, once the interface is defined, any number of classes can be implemented using that interface. That it means any number of classes can implement an interface defined. Also, one class can implement any number of interfaces. That it means once the interface is defined, any number of classes can implement that interface. In the same way, one class can implement many number of interfaces. So if you observe the last point here, this point, that it means also one class can implement any number of interfaces. Actually, this point is related to the multiple inheritance that was not achieved using classes in the inheritance by creating a class hierarchy. When we are trying to create a hierarchy of this way, many superclasses or a single class can extend the properties of two or more than one superclasses. Generally, this is considered as multiple inheritance. This is not achieved and not supported by the Java with respect to the classes for the inheritance concept. But whereas using interfaces, we can achieve this one by this statement. We can illustrate the concept of multiple inheritance. Next one. To implement an interface, a class must create the complete set of methods defined by the interface. So whenever we are trying to, already one interface is defined, some other class wants to implement the interface. Here the compared to the interface inheritance classes and coming to this inheritance interfaces. So the classes can be extended for achieving the interface, but whereas in coming to interfaces, classes implements the interfaces for achieving inheritance. So here the concept is a class when it is going to implement the interface existing or defined, so that class must create the complete set of methods defined by the interface. Whatever the methods defined in the interface, that methods are to be implemented in the class which is going to implement that interface. Got it? These are the key points and rules you have to be remind when you are going to work with the interfaces and achieving inheritance using these interfaces and classes. But however, each class is free to determine the details of its own implementation. So in the previous slide, the last point is when the class is going to implement any existing or defined interface, the set of methods all should be implemented by the class that are defined in the interface. But here the condition is, here the simple type of thing for the classes is they are free to determine their details its own. So classes can implement those methods on their own type of operations related to the method defined in the interface. So that is flexibility provided for the classes that are going to implement that interface. They can determine or they can implement the methods on their own by the subclasses. Next one, by providing the interface keyword in the Java, it allows you to fully utilize the aspect of polymorphism, and we can allow to implement this polymorphism perfectly. The concept nothing but one interface, multiple methods. One interface, one multiple methods. This was already achieved by us with the in the concept of inheritance by creating class hierarchy, level by level classes we are creating and accessing those methods defined in the superclass and subclass and subclasses like that. The same way here also, but the interface gives you fully utilize this interface of one interface and multiple method concept. And that leads to the successful implementation of polymorphism using interface keyword in Java programs. Next one, declaration of interface. Right here, an interface, the declaration of interface is much similar to the declaration of class. And see here, the general form of declaration of an interface is given here. So we know that generally access modifier is important to declare either class or an interface. And interface is a keyword that is used to declare an interface and followed by the name of the interface. And scope of this interface consists of many number of methods and with return type and with parameter list generally. So method name 1, method name 2, and you can define n number of methods with return type. And if you observe this method declaration inside of this interface, this method definition ends with a semicolon. That it means the implementation part of this method is not defined here in the interface. And whenever or whichever the classes implements this interface, they will implement on their own about this method of defined in the interface. Next one, and you can declare a variable, but inside this interface, whatever the variables you define, and the default they will consider as final and static variables. And the variable should be initialized inside of this interfaces. And you know that when we declare a variable as a final or static, and the value assigned to this variable will never change during the program execution. So this way it can allow, but in the previous slide we seen that class and interface difference point of view, interface doesn't have any variables. Yes, it is the true, but you can declare variable of type final and static. And if you just define like a default declaration of variables, compiler automatically consider those variables as final and static variables. And you can allow to create many number of variables of like final and static, many number of variables into this an interface, right? This is an example of declaration of interface. So here the interface name is wish, and the access specifier of this interface is public. And interface is the keyword used to create an interface like as we like. Okay. Next one, if you observe here, one method is defined with type specified and method name followed by parameter list and semicolon, that it means this method with no body definition, not body implementation. So this method is completely abstract method, and without implementation, this method defined in the interface. Got it? And we can declare any variable of any type as final, but it should be initialized. And just for the points we discussed in the previous slide, these are the reflections to define declaration of interface. And coming to when no access specifier is included for any declaration of interface, then that considers the default access, and the interface is only available to other members of the package in which it is declared. That it means in the next chapter of next unit, unit 4, we are going to study about the chapter called packages. In that packages, nothing but package could consist of the classes defined or interfaces defined as a collection of files in that package. And if any interface is only available to other members of the package, means when one interface is defined in any package, that interface can be accessed or available to the other members, nothing but other interfaces defined in the same package, other classes defined in the same package. And we will see this point clearly with respect to this interface in the packages chapter again. And when it is declared as a public, that it means, as we know that declaration of interface should consist an access specifier. When we define an interface as a public, that interface can be used by any member inside of that package or any outside of the package also. It is allowed to access that interface defined as public. And we know this public access specifier very well for with respect to the classes also, right? The same is adopted for interfaces. And in this case point of view, when there is a package and one interface is defined as a public, then in some of the cases, like in your program, only one interface is defined, as it is sometimes may be useful for the developers to declare only one interface in your program, right? In that case, The interface must be the only public interface declared in the file. Then the file must have the same name as the interface. And why this point is discussing here, it is possible sometimes may you create only one interface class, right? Only one interface class as a public. Then the file name of that file, that program, only in that program only we have only one interface. Then the program name and file name should be matched. But up to now, we have a one type of procedure declaring classes in a program, Java program files. And the class which contains the main method, the class name should be same as the file name. And this point is we are following till now while executing the programs. The same is adopted for interface. When we have in your Java program one interface, one class, or another class with main function, that class name which has the main function, that is a file name to this programs also. But the case when we have only one interface, not any class with main method, only one interface, and it is possible to declare one interface in a Java program, then only you can give the file name as interface name. Right? Understood? Here, in the previous example, we have already seen that methods that are declared inside of this interface or methods defined in the interface have no bodies. And we call those methods as abstract methods. And this concept is already covered in the abstract classes of inheritance. And they end with a semicolon after the parameter list. As it is observed that a method is defined in the interface and with no body, and the end of this definition of a method name, semicolon should be there. That it means of no body implementation is allowed in the interface. Right? Clear? Next one. There can be no default implementation of any method specified within an interface. Yes, there can be no default implementation of any method specified within an interface. Here, each class that includes an interface, what it means of here? Each class that includes an interface means any class is going to implement an interface. And I will show you the syntax how the inheritance can achieve between interface and class. And interface always work as superclass, as coming to, we know that in the interface concept. And whereas coming to this class should always be considered as a subclass to the interfaces. Why? Because interfaces doesn't have any implementations with respect to the methods defined in it. But whereas the class should need the methods defined by the interfaces, and that class should implement the interface, not extend. As we know that in the inheritance concept, classes can achieve the inheritance by using the extends keyword, but here it is the concept is different. Each class that includes an interface means any class implementing that interface, that class must implement all of the methods defined in the interface. All of the methods defined in the interface. But here the point is, there can be no default implementation of any method specified within an interface. The method define an interface without implementation, without body, that it means clear. Okay. Next one, variables. Once again, we are discussing about the variables with respect to the interface concept. Variables can be declared inside the interface declaration. They are implicitly considered as final and static variables. Final and static variables. And we know when we declare a variable as final, and the value assigned to that variable should not change during the program execution or entire in the entire program scope. But whereas when we declare a variable as a static, that variable should be initialized, right? Got it? So here this meaning they cannot be changed by the implementing class. Even though these variables are declaring or defining inside interface, the classes which are implementing these interfaces, and they can use those values for accessing only, but not changing or modifying, not allowed. And next one, they must also be initialized. They must also be initialized. They must be initialized in the interface when it is declaring variables, and that variables must be initialized. And all methods and variables are implicitly public. And this one is very, very important, and key points are there. Any method defined in the interface and any class implementing that interface, and the method defined in the interface should be implemented inside of the class which implements interface, right? And the class is going to implement the method defined by the interface and declare that method should be as public method. And it is a condition that must be declared that function method defined in the interface are going to implement by this class, and that should be as public. Got it? And we will see all these points one by one in the programming examples. Here is an example of an interface definition and how this interface can be declared. Interface declares that contains one method called callback. Here in this example, callback is a method defined in the interface that takes a single integer parameter as it is. So we can use interface no access specifier, then it will be considered as a default access specification, and the interface name is callback. So if you see here, capital C is a class interface name, and here it is when the name callback starts with small c, that is a name of the method defined in this callback interface, and it takes one parameter when it is invoked, right? And here it is, the type of the method defined in the interface is void. And if you observe this definition of the method defined in this interface, at the end clearly mentioned that is a semicolon, that it means this method doesn't have any body. And coming to the real-time example, working with some funny examples, like I'm going to create an interface with animal, and inside this animal, two methods are defined here, that is animal sound and animal can run, right? And observe these two methods are only defined, and the definition of these methods end with semicolon, that it means these interface method doesn't have any body, right? The same way this method also. So this is the concept related to the declaration of interface only. And when next we go see one by one, and examples also illustrate everything whatever we discussed in the introduction part, in this declaration part, and next one is implementation part. Next one, coming to the implementation of interface. Okay, coming to this implementation of interface, once an interface has been defined, once any interface defined, one or more classes can implement that interface, right? Once one interface is defined, one or more classes can implement that interface. Then how they can implement that interface? What is the syntax given in Java? So here, to implement any interface that were already defined, they use one keyword called implements. And this implement clause, nothing but implement keyword in the class definition and as shown in the below syntax here. And then create the methods defined by the interface. That is important, right? The general form of a class that includes the implements class look like this. Here, class is a keyword and followed by class name. And when it is going to implement any or extending the properties of any class, then we already used this statement called extends superclass, right? And coming to this interface point of view, any class going to adopt the properties or inheriting the properties of interface, it used the word keyword called implements in the class definition. Class keyword followed by class name, implements, interface name. Or it can implement one or more interfaces, then we mention those interface names with comma separated. And we'll see all these in examples clearly, don't worry. And coming to one simple short example for this, similar to the same interface created in the declaration of interface, public interface, wish is the interface name. And I have defined one method called hello with nobody as it is okay. And see here, this concept is much important here to understand. Now I have a class A here, and this class is going to implement the interface that defined here, right? So it uses implements keyword, implement clause in the class definition, the class declaration. Class keyword followed by class name, followed by implements clause or a keyword followed by interface name. So which is the interface name here. And when this class implements an interface, the method defined inside the all other set of methods defined in the interface should be implemented by this class. Should be mandatory, must be. And you should, this class should implement hello method with some implementation or with some body of the function or method, body of the method. So here, this class implementing this method with some set of instructions like here system.print.hello everyone. This class is going to wish everyone. So it implements interface wish for saying hello to everyone. So this is the simple scenario I have adopted to give better understanding of defining an interface and how to implement this interface by classes and how they are implementing on their own way of implementation. Suppose some other class B is going to implement this interface for wishing the same. Then maybe that class B can wish others like by using extending by implementing that hello function or hello method, saying something hello to hello everybody like that. Hello everyone, class A is saying, class B can implement on their own hello everybody like that. Okay, understood? Okay, coming to the some more points we need to discuss about this implementation of interface. If a class implements more than one interface, then the interfaces are separated with a comma. Yes, remember this point. When a class implements more than one interface, and this point is related to multiple inheritance. Multiple inheritance, right? More than one superclasses and the properties extended by single class. Actually, this concept was not supported in inheritance of Java. And whereas that multiple inheritance can be achieved using interface in Java. That is the point related to this one. This is. And next one, the methods that implement an interface must be declared public, right? This one, this point, see to this previous example here. So this function here should be public here. So remember this one. This function declaration and implementation should be as public here, should be public. Okay, remember this one, we just made a mistake here. That implementation of that method. Okay, that implementation of method defined by the interfaces, defined in the interfaces should be public. We just missed this one, right? The methods that implement an interface must be declared public in the classes. And also the type signature of the implementing method must match exactly the type signature specified in the interface definition. Yes, it is. If you observe that, the type signature specified in the interface is void hello parameter list. The same here, void hello parameter list should be matched. This one should match with this one declared in the interface, right? So here the type signature of implementing method must exactly the type signature specified in the interface definition. Next one, an interface can extend any interface. One interface can extend any interface, but cannot implement it, right? Okay. An interface can extend any interface again. That it means interfaces also use it to achieve inheritance. Among the interfaces also we can achieve interface by uh, extending one interface by another interface, extending the properties of one inheritance, one interface to another interface, same as in the classes. So as we know that in inheritance, one class properties can be extended to another new class created, right? The same way here also, one interface properties can be extended to another interface newly created. And we'll see examples about these points clearly. And but cannot implement it. Whenever this interface, a newly created interface extending the properties of already existing interface, it only extends the properties but not implement. That implement comes nothing but as we seen just between interface and class. The class implementing the interface must be implement all the methods defined in the interface. But whereas coming to the same type of inheritance or relation between two inheritances, right? One inheritance defines some methods and another inheritance, another interface inheriting the existing interface, and the concept as it's saying interface, the method should be implemented. But when we implement the methods in interface, that is not an interface. Simple point. So that's why an interface can extend only the interface properties, not implement. That it means inheritance between the interfaces should only use extends keyword, not implement keyword. Got it? Next one. Class implements interfaces, whereas interfaces extends interface. That's the point I'm going to try to give a clarity about. The same classes can implement interfaces, but whereas interfaces can extend only the interfaces, right? And the way you interfaces can and the relations between interface to class. So class can inherit interface. Class can inherit class. Okay, coming to interface can extend or can inherit interface, but but interface cannot inherit class. Remember this one and don't confuse with this. Okay, coming to one example, and here I will show you some examples clearly. If there are two or more same methods in two interfaces, a class implements both interfaces, right? then there is a condition to remember about these type of implementations here. Okay, coming to this example, in this program file, I have an interface A with method AAA, right? With method name AAA like this. Okay, and there is another interface in the same file, interface B, with same method like AAA, as it is possible in sometimes case, right? So coming to any class which implements both the interfaces, when a class can implement more than one interface that we already know, and how to implement that interfaces by this class, specifying in the definition, class definition. Here it is class definition followed by name of the class, implements keyword followed by interface name one, comma, second interface name. And these interface names are separated by a comma in class definition. This statement clearly giving the point that this class extended, that means this class going to implement two interfaces called A and B. And here actually the same method is defined by interface A and defined by interface B. And the implementation of that method once is enough. Only once is enough. No need to define this method two times, like only once the method is defined is enough for this. Okay, this will discuss in the next upcoming concepts also about this one. With example, we'll see some more cases, right? And coming to this point to remember, if there are two or more same methods in the two interfaces and a class implements both interfaces, the implementation of the method only once is enough, right? Next one. Coming to this example about with respect to variables also here given. Variable name conflicts can be resolved by interface name. So to understand this point, just coming to understand the behaviors of these interfaces and classes. So here one interface A having one instance variable x equal to 10. Got it? Another interface that B int x equal to 100. Int x equal to 100. These are, and these two variables are by default final and static. By default final and static. And the class hello is going to implement these two interfaces like this. Okay, as it is a valid statement and multiple inheritance it is, right? Inside of this main method, and this statement gives completely error because like this you can mention the name of x. X is a static variable, and we consider in the interface any variable declared in interface. By default, we consider those variables as final and static. So static variable cannot be accessed directly, right? Those variables, I mean, maybe here also the conflict about naming conflict about which x should be accessed here, either this x or this x. So it is completely name conflict, and it can be resolved by interface name while accessing this variables. We can allow to access that x by mentioning the name of the interface. This concept is not new for us. This was already covered in the C++ or in the static also. When we declare any method or a variable inside any class as a static, those methods can directly access without creating any object. Or there is another way, here it is, we can access that static variable and static method through class name only, through class name only. Class name dot static variable of the class. The same way here, name of the inheritance dot variable name defined in the interface. The same way here we can allow to access these two, and the output of this one is 10 and 100. Okay, naming conflict. I will show you the execution part, right? Okay. Okay, coming to this is the same example I have given. First I'm taking removing these comments lines here, then it automatically gets an error. Okay, I'm showing you the execution part. Coming to the console, here you can type, and remember the class name is hello. Okay, Java C hello.java. So no errors are getting hit. It is got error. So what is the error it displaying? Reference to X is ambiguous. That it means naming collision, naming conflict. So same X variable is defined in one interface A and interface B also. Then how this class can access that X with this ambiguous nature? Both variables X in A and variable X in B match. This is an error. So how it can be solved, resolved in interfaces like the same? This concept is, the concepts were already covered in the classes with respect to classes also. Okay. Then again coming to program. So I'm going to give it as a comment here. So then I'm saving the program. I'm going to run. Okay, come to here. Let me check once again. Is it giving error or solve with this named collision or ambiguous in name of the variable? So yes, it is got solved. Next one, execute this one. Java hello. Yes, it is. A is a instance variable final static variable defined in interface A, and 100 is a variable X initialized with 100. Okay, got it? Clear? So this is about implementation of interface with variables. Next one, another example, we can discuss one point here about. It is both permissible and common for classes that implement interfaces to define additional members of their own, So about this one, already we discussed these points. So here in this program, there is an animal interface. So interface animal is an interface name here. And inside this interface, we have a method called animal sound. Animal sound. The method type is void and it is declared as a public. So here, this method should be implemented by any class as a public, right? So coming to class cow implements animal. Animal is an interface, right? Animal is an interface. So cow is going to implement that animal interface, implements animal interface. So definitely this class must be implement this method, right? Defined in the animal. So what is this cow going to animal sound about cow? Public void animal sound. So it implementing that on its own. Cow says like this one, amba. Okay. And one more additional method is going to implement on their own, public void milk also. So milk is a method about this cow. This method cow gives milk. So these are the two methods defined in the class. And clearly observe here we are going to learn one or two more points about interfaces. Got it? So this was already given. The method should be implemented, defined in the interface, should be implemented as a public and should give at their own implementation. Got it? Understood? Then we can also add some local methods to this class also, right? Next one, there is an animal cow class, main class inside main method. So this cow class is going to create one object, my cow. So my cow dot animal sound. So this is the method invoked from this class, and it display on the screen the cow says amba. Okay. Next method, milk. So this can be invoked by this object that is valid, and it displays cow gives milk. So this is the simple scenario of how the class implements an interface, right? And it should implement, must and should implement the method defined in the interface, and it can also add its local methods to perform their own operations, and those can be accessed using the class objects directly. Understood? And I will switch to a programming part to execution of these things. So yeah, so coming to this file, the same have stored as here. Animal cow is my file name because uh, the main class of this program class contains main method. The class name is animal cow, right? This is the file name. This should be the file name, not any interface name, any class implementing name. The class which contains main method, that is the file name, right? That class name is the file name. This is similar to classes and interfaces, same. Okay. Then coming to executing this one. Okay. So here, class name is animal cow. Okay, no errors. Executing this one. Yes, the cow says amba and cow gives milk. So both methods are invoked by the cow class. The cow class already implements interface, right? Okay, these are the references we use to cover this content, and these are the references given by JNTK Kakinada Organizing Regulations. And additionally, we are adding some more links here to collect the examples to better understanding of the concepts.